Welcome back, YouTube Pipe Smokers. This is Spurgeon Piper. This is Wilson with you. I hope you guys have had a good, restful end of 2020, beginning of 2021 with the Christmas and New Year season. It was nice to get a little bit of a break for myself. We were gone for a couple days with family around Christmas and a couple days for New Year's, and so it was nice. It was much needed for me as we wrapped up 2020. So before we get into our topic, I wanted to let you know what I am smoking. I'm smoking some H&H Burley Flake, which I mentioned recently. It's something I've greatly enjoyed in the past several weeks. After I got a sample, I went in and bought some more. And then I'm smoking it out of my Celtic Rat Rays, which this is my English pipe, but Burley doesn't really affect that so much. So I threw in some of that for today, including along with that, as this is a day that I'm going to be able to smoke a little bit more than usual because I'm doing a lot of studying and preparation, my Peterson Donegal. So there you have it on that. Now, I haven't done a theology ministry themed video in a while. It's been focused on some other more Piper related videos or topics. But I did want to go ahead and touch on one. And looking back on 2020, it did come up to have a video on what it was like pastoring during 2020. Now, uh, everyone has suffered in various ways, and especially some in different parts of the country, of the United States, and especially during different parts of the world. But as a pastor, I carry on a little bit more responsibility over those things, especially those in my congregation. And so, um, during this year and having a congregation that's on the older side, they're more elderly. It's been quite more they've been quite more affected, maybe than younger populations or younger churches with younger population. And so we had a good portion of our church. Even when restrictions were lifted or alleviated, we had a good portion of our church not gather or meet in any way. And so that increased the amount of visitations I did, on who I visit and how I stay in contact with folks. And I'm definitely not alone on that. I know a lot of pastors, and I was kind of even comforted by hearing a pastor who's been pastoring at one church for 25 years in the Washington, D.C. area. He's a veteran in that regard, and he's quite wise. And he made the comment that this has been the worst year he's ever experienced as a pastor. I kind of found comfort in that because, boy, I felt so insufficient and inefficient in my duties. So as a pastor and as a shepherd of this flock that I have of a congregation, and that's how the Bible talks about what a pastor should be. Is he's not a, a businessman. He's not a executive. He's ultimately a pastor, a caregiver. And because of that, I felt a great weight and burden for those of uh, my flock or those of my congregation. And that doesn't stop after, let's just take the 5 o'clock period. And, we think of 8 to 5, kind of a routine, but of course, pastoral ministry kind of goes beyond that paradigm. And so many have struggled, and that's one aspect of the pandemic that has been very evident. Whether they realize it or not, overall, those who have not been able to gather in any way have greatly struggled. Most have been upfront about it, where they've struggled with depression, um, loneliness. Others have struggled with anger, and I don't know if they've always realized it, or there's been other aspects they've fallen into addictions, and uh, knowing that as it's always on my mind. And so when I got to the end of this year and trying to plan things and trying to serve them and then serve the community, and boy, our community has needs, and we don't have as many servants, we don't have as many volunteers. It became quite a burden, and to the extent of at the end of November and then December, I began just breaking down randomly. Sunday mornings, no one's around yet. It's early in the church, and I just I start to break down, or I'm alone in my house, and that occurs. Um, I've never really done that before, and so that was like a kind of a light switch went on for me that hey, I need to get away. I need to back off, and I need to take a break. That's not something I do too well, and so that has been a burden for many pastors. Uh, and other type of caregivers, I'm sure, in other avenues uh, of the workforce. But there was a strong need and strong requirement to take care of others who are alone. And it definitely, and I'm sure some of you have realized this, it definitely highlights the need for humans to interact. Greatly so. And I think statistics show that. I think the reports that come out of increase of depression, increase of substance abuse, increase of I've heard in Texas alone there was a report of the increase of abuse going on, like a physical abuse in the homes, and that is how for the closures of the economy and closures of various state or other size of governmental levels. That's the effect that it has had. And so I'm not arguing against foreclosures or shutdowns in any way. So I don't want to get into that, but that is a reality. And even more so as a Christian, and we see all throughout Scripture that we were meant to gather with uh, other believers. But even outside of that extent, humans were created to commune with one another. And when you take that aspect out of it, just like you take an aspect out of a gear out of an engine or a machine, something's gonna give. And that's just been very evident. And so I'm hoping as we get into 2021, no matter what your thoughts are on the vaccine, again, I don't want to touch on that, but I hope that does alleviate pressure. I hope that makes people more comfortable. I hope that allows maybe shutdowns to be alleviated and pressure on that side of things definitely would help the economy. That's a whole nother issue and how it's affected. I'm in a fairly small town that's lower class, and as I work at the food pantry on every other Saturday, handing out food, that has been evident, boy. So as I look back in 2021, as a pastor, I learned some things, and I'm grateful for what I did learn. It was hard. Um, and I'm not alone by no means, so I can't. I'm not going to wallow in self pity because I have no need for that. But it made me learn, number one, to have others around who will call me out uh, if I'm starting to shut myself in. I'm an introverted person. I don't know if that comes across at all. May not because it's on video. But I can be content for quite a while in staying by myself, away from others, whether it's reading or if I have time to fish or hunt or whatever else I'm doing, smoking my pipe along with it. And I can be content for a while. But even then, I need interaction. So it's good to have someone to call me on that and force me out of that. My wife's wonderful at that, especially. Two, it's good to have someone who will call you out when they see you struggling. So this kind of touches in on the first mark. Um, you and I have blind sides, and whether we're thinking emotionally or spiritually, I'm thinking both for my situation. We have blind sides, and I've had a couple of people. One is my wife, once again, but I have other guys. One is a pastor. One is a fellow church member who's like an elder or like a pastor for me, alongside of me. They would just look me in the eye and ask me how I'm doing. So not like the normal pleasantries you have with someone when you're meeting them on the street or you walk into a store or into their home and they're like, "Hey, how are you doing?" "Good. How are you doing?" They meant it uh, intently. "How are you doing?" And when I was asked that, I nearly broke down there because I made me stop and truthfully answer that. And at those times, I wasn't doing too well. So it's good to have someone around that will do that for you. because we have our blind sides. We need someone to call us out on those things. And then as a husband and a father, and especially a pastor, it did make me realize how insufficient I am and inefficient I am. And I think that was a wonderful lesson to learn. And it made me place even more trust and strength in Christ and in my walk with Him, because I'm greatly inefficient. Um, I'm inefficient in how I can fully give and care for others. How easy it is to stretch so thinly in providing for your family and providing for, which involves if you have a spouse, your spouse, and then your children if you have children, and then you add on top of that care for your church, and then you have, on top of that, caring for those in the community, which I try to do as best as possible, and then add on studies and all that stuff that goes on top of that, and you just stretch yourself so thinly, like butter on a piece of bread. And I needed to realize how insufficient I am, and I'm human, and I need sleep, and I need rest, and I'm grateful that I can trust in God's goodness and sovereignty in those situations. So going through 2021, those are lessons I learned that I can take into 2021, and I hope, and my prayer is that I don't have a repeat. We don't have a repeat, and for you, our shutdowns are different, and some of us are going to have to stay more enclosed than others, just depending on regulations and depending on your health and things like that. Very understandable situations, but be aware if you aren't already, and I'm sure you are, but be aware of how insufficient you are by yourself. Even if you're like me, you're introverted, be aware that you can succumb to depression and loneliness, and it can greatly affect you. If you can be around others, be around others, and especially those maybe are close to you, open up. And even if you can't be around them because of restrictions, at least be in contact via phone call and force yourself to be in contact with someone. And I think you'll find great blessings out of that. It's needed. We need it greatly. I hope as a society we learn that, and when we're able to get out of these rivets and grinds of trying to be sufficient in all these in the situation we're in. So that's all I have, guys. This was kind of more of a rambling and not the norm of usual of my videos. So I hope that's encouraging or useful for you. Maybe gives you insight into what's going on. This Friday, I'll have a tobacco review. I'm looking forward to it. And going forward, I'm hoping I have set up some interviews in different avenues. So pipe and tobacco specifically, mostly, but then getting into some other avenues of interviews. And so I'm looking forward to that. And I am looking forward to 2021. So I hope you guys have a great week. Hope you're blessed and you're taking care. And we will talk to you guys soon.